This is Elton Kane for Finextra at the FinTechStage Inclusion Forum in Jakarta, and I'm here with Sopnendu Mohanty, Chief Fintech Officer of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Authority has been working in a number of areas the past several years since you became Chief Fintech Officer to simplify financial regulation, to enable innovation from fintechs and others. Can you tell me a little bit about the areas you've been working in?
I think it's been now 2 years, coming to 2 years of the job. My experience has been, there was an initial set of expectation when it comes to fintech, and that expectation was pretty much boxed in something we see more on the retail side of fintech. Build a financial platform which allows seamless payments or allows seamless lending and so forth. I think that's the initial, I see the initial trap of narrative of fintech. But progressively what we have done in MAS and broadly within the fintech community is how do we go below that skin, go deeper into the subsystems and the systems around the core bedrock of financial infrastructure. And that has been the most difficult part. How do we disaggregate large monolithic enterprise systems which are not designed to be agile, nimble, and more reactive to modern technology. So how do we take the industry to that path has been my kind of evolving policy thinking as we speak. So a lot of my own policy understanding and policy views has been around solving that deeper technology need for the financial sector.
So this would include areas such as cloud computing, open API, breakdown of processes, etc.?
So I use this abstract thought that financial sector should be running on a highly scalable digital infrastructure, and that's what we need to talk about cloud computing. And that's the reality, we can't just avoid it. We got to talk more about it, look at the policy implications, look at the security, resilience, and so forth. Second, the amount of data which is going to be created as part of the digital revolution is humongous. You are creating data as we speak. Now, this data has to be processed, has to be computed, has to be managed, and for that you need to have a solid, strong, sustainable cloud computing infrastructure. That's one piece. The second piece is around breaking value chain to small and make it more efficient. For that, you take the advantage of the startup revolution, the innovation and all these things. Now, how do you do that? To do that, you have to disaggregate these platforms to small modular structures. And that goes deep into the back office, middle office infrastructure. So the policy making thinking around that is to work with the banks, work with industry, start breaking down those infrastructure into small logical grouping, whether it is insurance, whether it is a capital market, whether it is trade finance, retail, and so forth. And then open up those pipes or APIs, and with the data being a proprietary competitive advantage of the banks, to talk to many innovations happening outside, and so they can connect back to those platforms. And that way you liberate many things. You liberate the infrastructure from being stuck in many years of no change. You create an ability for the business managers and the stakeholders to start leveraging technology as it happens. And today the life cycle of new technology is between 6 months to 1 year. And systems have to be designed to react to that. Against, you take few years back, system refresh cycle is 10 years. So there is okay to live with that enterprise monolithic infrastructure. Now it's not a choice. So that's the infrastructure, API, the broad policy which we have come out. And we are constantly looking at it. And it's not the end itself. We're constantly looking at to improve it, make it much more simpler, secure, and much more easy to adopt to the new world of fintech. And the third is around cybersecurity. Again, a reality. You cannot avoid cybersecurity by saying that we'll put an analog governance structure around it. It has to be digitally managed. It has to be done digitally. It has to be designed digitally. When you bring applications to the financial sector, cybersecurity should be within the core design thinking. it is hard to imagine that I'll put a governance structure on cybersecurity on a platform which is zillions and zillions of data and processing activity. So how do we bring cybersecurity as core to the design thinking is a third policy refinement we are constantly doing and as a part of the broad FinTech 2.0 deep infrastructure shift to the modern world of innovation.
Another thing that MAS has been working on recently, since last year, has been establishing a central KYC utility for Singapore. It's gone into pilot stage with 2 banks. Can you give me an update on how that's proceeding and where it's going next?
So it's progressing nicely. We are looking at refinement of the model, the golden source of data, the working with the government agencies. So we will get the pilot out of the way in next few months. Then once those APIs and the golden source are available, then other can come in and use those infrastructure for the basic KYC. There are some discussion around what you call KYC++, things around nuanced inference of data, and that's, I think, needs some more industry participation, industry utility, and that's a staged discussion. But before you go to KYC, I think the core which I spoke today in the conference is how to build a national strategy around digital identity. But that's the core. I mean, that's the engine, that's the heart of your identification. And all the attributes, digital attributes, whether you're a company or an individual, is built around that. So you got to have a strong national digital identity infrastructure, then build the KYC digital attributes around it, and then the distribution of the data in a safe and secure way so that you are not compromising the broad cybersecurity issues you have around digital data.
Over the past year or so, many regulators have been investing in setting up sandboxes that fintechs can use to test their business models and approaches with the regulators before proceeding further. Can you tell me a bit about how MAS has set up its sandbox and how you see these regulatory sandboxes evolving?
I think sandbox was a good thought, and I think regulators, and I always believe it's always incremental thinking. So they start looking at process sandbox, they look at creating a safe and secure policy where you can do experiment. But I think we're in a stage where we have to now have a physical sandbox. I think that's the big technical challenge we got to solve. And I don't believe there is some play for at a country level to have a regulatory physical sandbox. I think really what the need of the hour is to build a cross-jurisdiction sandbox, because most of the financial sector products are cross-jurisdiction in nature, they're global in nature, so they need to have a more cross-border thinking. So how do you build a physical sandbox where I can bring fintech companies, connect to the banks, experiment, bring the regulators to the picture, and have a real interactive way to policy making? And I always make this comment. Policy making has to now shift from white paper, public consultation to experimentation-based policy making, where you do policy making by looking at outcome coming through smart experiments. I think that's the paradigm shift. We'll start looking at the sandbox. And for that, we need to think about the technical aspect of how to build a physical sandbox, which is kind of my current thinking of building one. I think that perhaps is the only way out, and that's what my focus will be in the next few months, working with my fellow regulators to think of building such things.
Sopnendu, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, that was good.